On January 5th, Damon Linker wrote an op-ed for The Week titled, "Are We Witnessing the Fall of the United States?" Little did he know, one day later, many Trump supporters would storm the U.S. Capitol. Right now, according to a poll, almost every single Democrat wants Donald Trump impeached and convicted. And almost every single Trump supporter actually wants him to stay president for 4 more years. I mean, it's obvious. The people who support him want him to stay president. The people who don't like him want him gone. And Trump's going to be gone. Joe Biden will be president. But in this poll, they also found that 4 in 5 people polled in this country believe the United States is falling apart. I thought that poll was interesting because it comes recently, because we saw this op-ed from The Week, and there are many other think pieces talking about signs that the U.S. is in decline. You know, the famous statement, the famous idea that empires only last 250 years or so on average may or may not be true, but it's what people often say. It's now being brought up across social media as people point out the United States is just about 244 years old, meaning in only a few years we'll be at the average point of failure for an empire. Some people have pushed back saying America's not an empire, so it's not going to collapse, but it kind of is. I mean, we are stretched thin. We have military bases all over the world. We are spending money, and we are printing money faster than we can spend it. And in this past year, in the past 9 months, we've printed about 66% of all U.S. dollars. And by printed, I mean typed into a computer, but created. We're now hearing that Joe Biden wants to increase spending by another $2 trillion. Unprecedented spending at a time of extreme political turmoil, violence in the streets, think pieces coming out in the mainstream media about the fall of the United States. Maybe it's just pessimism, perhaps. But do you know which country right now actually believes they are witnessing the end of the United States? China. A new story out from Bloomberg talks about how people in China are flocking to buy a 30-year-old book that predicted the decline of the U.S. We also have China's efforts to dismantle and destroy the U.S. and now potential threats of war. All of this is happening right now. The news cycle is inundated with Trump and Pelosi and impeachment and McConnell. And there's so much more that's happening. I read the story about Mike Pompeo not wanting to meet with China and threats of war, and people in China believing that they're witnessing the end of the United States. And this poll that just came out, and I thought to myself, maybe it's true that we're really collapsing. And I've talked about it before, but maybe it's not just about being, it's not about being pessimistic. You can be optimistic, that's fine. But when I see all of this political turmoil right now over Donald Trump, and I think about what's going on the international stage, as I've said several times, this is the worst possible time for internal strife in the U.S. as China is imposing its will on the South China Sea, the Pacific, threatening Hong Kong and Taiwan, pressing on up against India. There's real threats to the global stage with what China is doing. And China's becoming desperate as well, trying to import grains because, well, it's trade war and they're lacking resources and they're currently in diplomatic conflict with Australia. That threat from China is very real. Now, I'm worried about something called Thucydides' trap, which states, as one power starts to rise and overcome the dominant power, war becomes inevitable. There's only a few instances where it didn't happen. But maybe one thing that would prevent it this time is that the U.S. will tear itself apart from within. Let me read you some of these stories and tell you what's going on. And I want to lay out the more important news about China, why they think we're falling apart. And I want to show you things that are happening that I think absolutely, at least provide evidence. I don't want to say absolutely prove, but at least provide evidence. Don Lemon on CNN recently came out and said, every single person who supported Trump is on the side of the Klan. It's that kind of rhetoric that says to me, there's no mending this divide. And maybe the people in China are correct about what's happening. It could be by their own hand. Before we get started, for whatever it's worth, head over to timcast.com to become a member to support my work. I'm facing serious threats of censorship and restriction. Always have, but now it's real. Facebook recently restricted my page. I did a segment about it earlier. It'll be on the podcast for those listening. I need to build a core base of members who really do believe in my work and want to support me by being a member. We will give you access to members-only content. We're going to increase the amount of work we're doing. We're going to do live events at our studio where you will be invited on a first-come, first-served basis, which means probably really hard to get tickets. But look, if we end up with several thousand paying members, then it's not like winning the lottery. It's just like buying a ticket, and you might actually be able to get here, come hang out at our studios with our guests, and watch the live show in real time. So becoming a member is the most important thing you can do, especially considering everything that's going on. Not that I'm super confident in what's going to be happening in the future, considering 4 in 5 say the U.S. is falling apart, and this is from The Hill. That freaked me out. If you like my content, subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit that like button. And again, go to timcast.com and become a member. And let me just stress, if I really was 100% convinced we were doomed, I wouldn't be asking for your support. I'd probably just turn off the cameras and then start building a bunker or something. But I'm not prepping for the end of the world. I just think what we can expect to see now is the back end of the bell curve. What does that mean? Well, the United States rose up really high and we hit our peak. And now we're coming down the other end. So for the time being, things will probably be chaotic. It will be, getting worse. But it's not going to be like you're going to wake up tomorrow starving to death. I think it's just going to be the beginning of the dark times. For too long, we in this country have been living in a golden age. It's been beautiful. Growing up without a care in the world. I mean, we had certain serious terror attacks on our soil. But for the most part, Americans are spoiled, fat, and happy. They've been becoming increasingly enraged at each other as tribalism tears everyone apart because of social media. But it's because we have no purpose. There's nothing for us to do. We've conquered the elements. We have too much food. We're all mostly overweight. And we're not happy with how good things are, even though we've had it better than ever. Here's the story from The Hill. They say approximately 4 in 5 Americans say they believe the U.S. is falling apart, according to a new Axios Ipsos poll released 1 week after the deadly pro-Trump riot at the U.S. Capitol. The poll, which included interviews with more than 1,000 adults from Monday to Wednesday, found that most respondents either strongly or somewhat agreed with the statement, America is falling apart. At the same time, a similar proportion of those surveyed indicated they were proud to be an American. The poll, which reported a margin of error about 4.6 percentage points, was released the same day the House voted along bipartisan lines to impeach President Trump for his role in the Capitol riot. They go on to say, while there is overwhelming support for Trump's removal among liberals and moderate Democrats, with each at 92%, 94% of those who identified as the president's supporters disagreed, and 66% of traditional Republicans opposed the move. Among Trump supporters, 91% backed the president's continued challenge of election results. We are 6 days away from Donald Trump no longer being president, and 91% of his supporters still want him to fight to stay in the presidency. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying the tribal lines are solidified. So call me pessimistic, call me a doomer or whatever, or black-pilled, whatever you want to call it. I think it's realism. I'm not making up these stats. It's coming from The Hill. When I started looking into this, I saw that study and I said, how many people truly believe this? Is it true what they're saying? And I find this story from the week. Are we witnessing the fall of the United States? From Damon Linker on January 5th, 1 day before what happened. I wonder what this man is thinking now. He's probably written about it. Now, his perspective is very anti-Trump. He's critical of Trump. Trump is corrupt and all of these things. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you who is right or wrong. I often do, and you know which side of the line I typically fall on. But just think about what people are thinking. Think about what other people might do. And then from that, make a decision about what you should do. What I'm saying is, so long as Trump supporters are claiming Joe Biden is compromised and he's corrupt, and so long as so long as Trump supporters are saying that, so long as anti-Trump people are saying Trump is crooked and compromised, realize that both sides believe basically the same things, are accusing the other of spreading fake news, and are now at the point where they don't like the police and the establishment. And, well, we're on the verge of some very serious conflict. I think we're already in it. Civil war territory. Trump supporters literally stormed the Capitol building. Call it whatever you want. He goes on to mention the president lost a free and fair election 2 months ago. The votes are counted, but he's still insisting it's fraud. He said if we saw this happening in another country, we would conclude that the man who for the next 2 weeks occupies the nation's highest office is mentally unfit. aspiring tyrant. When this is combined with the events queued up to unfold in Congress on Wednesday, when at least a dozen senators and as many as 140 of the House of Representatives are prepared to object to the congressional certification of Joe Biden as the winner, we are left with a vision of a country in which a large portion of one of its two major parties is prepared to countenance an unconstitutional and anti-democratic power grab. Forgive me, but didn't the Democrats do this for the 4 years of Trump? What's happening now is completely predictable, completely. We saw what they did to Trump with this investigation. We saw the lies and the smears. We saw the wasted money and the desperate attempts to accuse Trump of secretly working for the Soviet KGB. I'm not even kidding about that part. That was on MSNBC. Why would they even float that idea? It's not starting now. And to be honest, it didn't start with Donald Trump. Trump is a symptom of, not the cause of. But we can see the lines, the fissure has become so intense the sides are separated and will not mend. And I talked to so many people years ago, now 3 years ago. This is 2018, man. I was talking to conservatives and I said, I'm worried about a civil war. I was talking to former friends of I was talking about friends of mine, formerly, let me fix that phrase. I was talking to friends of mine that work for Vice. I was formerly employee of, so former coworkers. And I warned them this was coming and they didn't believe me. I didn't say it should. I said, when you see the cracks in the ground and the split, what do you think is going to happen? Should I just assume at some point we're all going to come together, hug, and then build a bridge across this divide? I don't. The hatred is too pronounced. It's just getting worse every day. I mean, AOC, the things she's been saying, the fact that I have to criticize her for saying it is just another sign of the division between me and her position on the ground and the other side. They'll complain about Matt Gaetz and him propping up Trump's delusions or whatever. Fine. I'm not going to look. You guys know that I actually think Joe Biden is crooked and where I fall on this and all of my content. But right now, the point I'm trying to get across is that doesn't matter in the bigger picture. It does. Don't get me wrong. Okay. What I'm trying to say is if we're looking at what may be the collapse of the U.S., whether we want it to or not, I think it's a terrible thing considering China's a very serious threat and we need to come together to prevent that. Just look at how people feel about each other and where we ultimately go. Which brings me to this story from Bloomberg. From just yesterday, a $2,500 book on U.S. decline is suddenly a must-read in China. They say after chaos engulfed the U.S. Capitol last week, some Chinese intellectuals found themselves searching for copies of an out-of-print book to make sense of events. America Against America forecast the U.S. decline due to domestic conflicts more than 30 years ago. Among the things driving demand was the author, Wang Huning, the Communist Party's number 5 leader and top political theorist to 3 Chinese presidents. Some copies have surged to more than 16,600 yuan, $2,500, on Kungfuzi, an online marketplace for antiques. That's more than 3,000 times its original asking price in 1991, when Japan was more widely seen as America's biggest economic rival. The interest in the book is the result of a renewed desire to understand a U.S. that is in the midst of a civil Cold War, said Wang Wen, executive dean of Renmin University in Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies. China's doubts about the U.S. will certainly increase in light of recent events. The Capitol Hill turmoil is being read in Beijing as the most powerful sign yet that societal fissures in the U.S. are behind increasingly erratic foreign policy shifts. That's feeding Chinese apprehension about reaching agreements on trade or other politically charged disputes with President-elect Joe Biden. Aris Rusinos, I'm probably pronouncing your name wrong, Aris, is an academic and journalist, and he wrote recently about Europe breaking away from American entanglements and interests. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the general idea I think is there that Europe needs to separate itself from the U.S. for obvious reasons. Now, in my opinion, I get why people would feel this way, either in China or Europe. The U.S. is completely unstable. We have legitimate personalities talking about secession. We had John Podesta, one of the top Democrats, in a war game scenario published by the Boston Globe, was advocating for the West Coast to secede from the Union. Now we're hearing people just say peaceful divorce. No surprise, other countries are saying maybe we should back away from the U.S. Now, it's not surprising to me that China feels this way. I think China has been one of the key facilitators of the conflict. Take a look at this. NASA scientist pleads guilty to lying about China ties. From Reuters, a senior NASA scientist pleaded guilty on Wednesday to lying about his ties to a program that encourages researchers to develop relationships with China in exchange for grants, the DOJ said on Wednesday. Maya Mayapan, 66, of Pacifica, California, entered his plea before U.S. District Judge Kevin Castle in Manhattan. Prosecutor said Mayapan participated in the Thousand Talents Program, a Chinese government program to recruit people familiar with foreign technology and intellectual property, and held professorships at the University of China in South Korea and Japan. He concealed his work from NASA and U.S. Office of Government Ethics and falsely told investigators on October 27th he was not a member. He lied. China has been recruiting people in America. They've been stealing intellectual property, stealing research, and subverting our internal politics. I believe that this is fourth and fifth generational warfare. China is doing a really great job of destabilizing this country. So it's no surprise that they're now saying the U.S. is in decline and it's collapsing. This was a story that really freaked me out from a couple days ago. U.S. says Mike Pompeo won't go to Taiwan after Chinese state media warns such a trip may trigger a war. Is that it now? U.S. interests will not meet in Taiwan, U.S. officials, because they're scared of China? Yup. So where does that bring this country? To its knees? Taiwan is in serious danger. Recently, there was a large protest in Taiwan in support of Donald Trump. Why? Well, Joe Biden's foreign transition team includes some individuals who have praised the economic growth of China, and defended them in some very serious international incidents. Many people now believe that in the event that China seeks to reclaim Taiwan, storming its beaches, Joe Biden will do nothing to prevent it, and that a Joe Biden presidency will be weak and allow China to finally grow, expand, and dominate global politics, pushing the United States under China well before anyone expected it would happen. Now, some believe that Joe Biden himself is actually compromised. Tony Bobulinski, a family confidant of the Bidens, said he was. And the Bidens did fly to China, Joe Biden and his son, on Air Force Two, government property, for a private equity deal for Hunter Biden. This has people freaked out, and it contributes to the absolute conflict. South China Morning Post says spokeswoman tweets that Europe tour will be his final as Secretary of State, and says China's nervous panic diplomacy is unwarranted and dangerous. Global Times commentary said Beijing's response would be overwhelming if Pompeo visited Ireland after lifting restrictions on official contacts. I don't want war. I want peace. I want calm. But China is an authoritarian dictatorship with concentration camps. So what do we do? Does the United States just roll over and accept their role in our conflict, like the internal conflicts we're facing? Do we just accept that they've been subverting our academic institutions with the Thousand Talent Program? Can we even do anything about it at this point? I don't know. You know, let me show you this from the American Conservative. We knew it was coming. The last stage of empire is now. From July 8th, 2020. They said, over the holiday weekend, the U.S. turned 244 years old. Time flies. But is this old for a nation? Do nations have lifespans like organisms? Aren't ideas and principles immortal? It's natural to speak of our nation as something that will continue indefinitely long beyond our mortal existence. But a crucial distinction must be made. America was a nation in 1776. Today, she is an empire. Therefore, one could ask, do empires have lifespans? Fortunately, the British Army officer and scholar Sir John Glubb pondered this question in a short essay titled Fate of Empires and Search for Survival. He goes on to say, a contemporary of T.E. Lawrence and another British soldier scholar popularly remembered as Lawrence of Arabia, Glubb commanded Transjordan's Arab Legion from 1939 to 1956. An inquisitive, humble mind, his experiences and interest in history led him to recognize patterns in the rise and fall of empires. His studies revealed that, like organisms, empires flow through stages of creation, growth, maturity, decline, and death. Glubb tracked each of these phases and found remarkable similarities between empires as diverse as the Roman Empire and Republic, the Ottomans, and the Persian Empire. Independent of race, creed, institutions, or geography, the estimated average lifespan of dozens of empires of the last 3 millennia, about 250 years. He says it isn't hard to recognize Glubb's general pattern of imperial progression in the American story. The good news for conservatives is that the American empire as it currently stands is coming to an end. The bad news is yet to be written. What will become of the empire as it disintegrates? And how will it affect the seed nation? Perhaps, as Glubb intended, we can learn from history and avoid the worst possible fates. There's some pushback on this idea because they're not talking about the age of nations. There are empires that exist today. Well, I should say there are nations that exist today that were part of empires that continue to thrive and exist, and many of the relics of that empire still exist. I mean, you can go to Rome. Rome still has tremendous power, but the Roman Empire ended a long time ago. The UK still has tremendous power, way less than they did at the height of the British Empire. The US will exist as a nation, perhaps, but many of the people who live in these places, the states, will likely persist. The question is, how long has America been an empire, not a nation? If empires last 250 years, how long do nations last, and when did America become an empire? That's more of the optimistic view. It may not be collapse, it may just be turmoil, or it may lead to the violent death throes of an aging empire. Perhaps what we're looking at is I was reading a Daily Beast article that said this is it was a failed conspiracy from, I believe it was called a guy named Catiline, the Catiline conspiracy. And they said in Rome, before Caesar, there was an attempt. Once Caesar saw this, came into power, he realized the corruption in the Senate, and then, he crossed the Rubicon. I don't think Trump is Caesar, and I certainly don't think he's Hitler. As Mike Cernovich said, he's a Kardashian. But what if there's someone else watching right now, seeing what's going on, and we do get the rise of some individual who decides to be the emperor, to cross the Rubicon? A strong man, not Joe Biden. Maybe Joe Biden is so weak that he leads us to the arms of a strongman personality who reforms this great nation, the Republic, into the first global empire. I'm kidding. It's a Star Wars line, but you get the point. Maybe we're not really collapsing. Maybe we are. China seems to think so. And there are threats of war, and there have been for some time. Americans seem to agree we're falling apart. And this narrative is kind of scary because governments are built on confidence. If 4 to 5 Americans believe this country is collapsing and they're losing confidence in the government, then the government doesn't exist. It's an abstract concept that exists in the minds of the people. If people don't feel confident in their currency and their jobs, why would they want the currency or the job? Right now, most of law enforcement and military, in my opinion, fall in line, not because of a sense of duty, although many do. I think most just need a job. And they're probably watching the suffering and the homelessness, the evictions, the inability to make money from the average person in the lockdown, thinking, I don't want to be like that. But as the money supply is just massively expanded, take a look at this chart. The M1 money stock. It is now, a 70% increase? Remarkable. 66 to 70% increase in 9 months from, almost a year now. From the beginning of February 17, we saw the massive spike in the M1 money supply. Some people don't think M1 is all that relevant and doesn't correlate properly because there's other standards, M2 and M3. But M1 is the actual, liquid money of this country. We've not seen anything like this before, this mass printing of money. Combine that with the lockdown, and what can you really go do? I don't know about you guys. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I've sat down with my friends, and we've talked about, want to go do something? What can we do? Nowhere to go. Can't go to a bar. You can sort of go out to eat in many places, and that's still kind of okay. No malls, really, for the most part. The lockdowns are getting worse. We went out to the middle of nowhere. But you don't need money to go to the middle of nowhere. So nobody really spent anything. If you don't need the money to buy things, why do you need the job? I don't know. Let me show you some things that lead me to believe that we are facing collapse. First, we have this story from Vice. The scientist who predicted 2020's political unrest on what comes next. They say in 2012, Vice published an article titled, 2012 is BS, 2020 is when we'll really be in trouble. They looked at the Arab Spring. And then this researcher said, based on certain metrics, it looks like 2020 will be extreme political unrest. I don't think he outright said the U.S. would collapse, but the idea was still there. Data existed that made it predictable. We see this. Don Lemon. Trump voters are on the side of Klansmen, Nazis, and the Capitol rioters. Dan Crenshaw calls the remarks truly vile, but incredibly predictable. Agree with Don Lemon, disagree with Don Lemon. The fact is, he's telling us right now the divide will never be mended. Never. Like I showed you in the beginning, Trump supporters, 91%, want him to continue his efforts to stay as president. And Don Lemon said, if you're not with us, you are against us. Message was heard loud and clear. Olympic swimmer Cleet Keller charged with taking part in breach of Capitol building. An Olympic swimmer? A prestigious title? What is he? A medalist, isn't he? 5-time Olympic swimming medalist has been charged in the riot. This is not some slack-jawed yokel. It's not Cletus from The Simpsons. It's not some random, a cross-wearing redneck. It is an Olympic medalist. Competed on behalf of these United States and won a medal 5 times. He's charged? That's crazy. What about this? 2 Virginian police officers charged in connection with the Capitol riot. People from Virginia, actual law enforcement storming the building. Now, how about the craziest? Capitol cop allegedly wore MAGA hat and directed pro-Trump mob around the building. He and a second officer who posed for a selfie allegedly with a rioter have been suspended. At least 10 being investigated after assault on Capitol. And there are reports that one cop was actually arrested. What happens when you have a Capitol police officer in a MAGA hat supporting the people storming the Capitol? The lines have been drawn. With all that money being printed, with the ideological divide going becoming so obvious that even police officers are engaging in the rioting at the Capitol, why would they give up now? I've repeatedly and routinely called for peace because you do not want to experience a collapse. I have seen it as a visitor to some countries, and it was a privilege that I, as an American, could escape, as many people couldn't. In Egypt, when they gunned people down, when the military came and just got rid of the dissidents because it was destabilizing the nation. You do not want the violence. But if the collapse is real, and these people in China are correct, then I fear for what's to come for the people of this country. And I hope people have been taking precautions to the best of their abilities. And I hope we get through these next 6 days, 7 days, peacefully and calmly. But it's about more than all of this. Joe Biden's proposing $2 trillion of extra spending at a time when the deficit is skyrocketing and the debt is at an all-time high, and the debt to GDP ratio is at 130%. Political clashes in the streets, people fighting each other and calling for violence. I moved out to the middle of nowhere a while back. I built a van, a bug-out van. It's just a RV, to be completely honest. It's a recreational vehicle. That's all it really is. I built it because you never know. And it was, I believe, 2018 when I was on the Joe. Was it 2018 or was it 2019? I can't remember. It's been so long. Wow, since I was on the Joe Rogan Experience talking about censorship and what it will lead to. I think it was early 2019, right? And at the end of the episode, I said, I'm building a van because if you keep doing what you are doing on Twitter with this censorship, it will result in violence and chaos and, maybe even civil war. And people laughed. They were like, it's so funny. Tim's so crazy. What a crazy weirdo. How funny. Since then, I've gained millions of subscribers. My channels grew to, I believe, the biggest political commentary, over 120 million views over a few months. And I think people were listening. And the funny thing is, it seems to be mostly run-of-the-mill regular individuals. The staunchest of Trump supporters have routinely criticized me. And they especially do now because I say peace and persuasion and resource is the key to winning a victory these days. But many don't want to hear it. So I get these emails and they're scary. Let me show you the funniest and truly nightmarish sign of the dark times are coming. Macaulay Culkin throws support behind calls to have Trump cameo edited out of Home Alone 2. That's what Stalin was doing. Editing people out. The censorship bureau was removing people. That's creepy stuff, man. You don't have to like the guy, but come on. He existed. So what do we get if this is where we end up? History being erased. Street names are being changed. People are storming the Capitol. I don't care which side you're on. It's just here. It doesn't matter if you think you're right or wrong. Maybe you think you're right. That's fine. I'm just saying, whatever is happening is happening. Take a look at the external perspective, that of China. The people who are rushing to the store or online to try and buy this book because they believe the U.S. is collapsing. Interesting. I hope you're all safe, calm. I hope you all spend some time with loved ones, have a nice bite to eat. Go out, find a place to get some of that delicious food. Do what you can. But I also recognize that many people are already destitute because of the lockdowns. So there it is. If you want to argue that the political decline is just normal political strife and that it's not the worst we've ever seen, that's fine. But the lockdown and the money printing is completely unprecedented. Completely. I hope we pull out of it. I hope we survive. I hope we come together. And I'm not sure we will. It's not pessimism. It's just realism. That's it. I guess you could say maybe it is pessimistic, but 4 in 5 Americans think we're falling apart. I'll leave it there. Next segment will be tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL, where we will discuss more of this, expound upon these ideas, and probably laugh a little bit more. So again, check it out. Check out youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Subscribe now. Become a member over at timcast.com, and we will see you at 8 p.m. live. Thanks for hanging out.